Good afternoon. My name is Councillor Richard Jones, Deputy Mayor of Sandwell. Unfortunately, the Mayor of Sandwell is unable to be with you today as he's recovering from a surgical procedure. The Festival of Remembrance is usually held at West Bromwich Town Hall, but due to the current situation, this has not been able to take place. Therefore, I would ask for you to join us whilst we share with you elements of the festival which has specially been recorded for today. Amongst the pieces today are poems and songs from school children, local faith leaders sharing their own thoughts and reflections, and wartime stories, connections to our towns. We know that many of you will have missed not being able to attend the festival again this year, but we also know you understand and appreciate that this decision has been taken out of our hands. We hope you enjoy our virtual festival and take time to quietly remember the importance of remembrance, and also hope this will serve as a reminder of the past and honour those who serve and who are serving their country so valiantly. Please continue to take care and keep safe. Thank you.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. We will remember them.
My name's David Gould. I'm Vicar at Holy Trinity Smelwick, and it's also my great privilege to be the convening person for the Faithful Friends Interfaith team here in Sandwell. And I'd like to introduce some of my faithful friends who'd like to say something about Remembrance this year in Sandwell.
Remembrance Sunday is about remembering those members of our communities who fought in the World War. Let's get together to pay our respects by remembering the sacrifices of soldiers and veterans. Let's honour and celebrate the tradition of military service together in Sandwell.
Dear brothers and sisters, we feel blessed that we are all enjoying democracy and freedom, and also in many parts of Commonwealth too. And this is only because of the sacrifices made by our forefathers, by our elders, and particularly armed forces. And we remember them, we pay our respect, and we also remind to ourselves our duty, our responsibility toward protecting democracy and independence. Thank you.
I greet you with the universal greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May God's peace and blessings be with us all. On the occasion of remembrance, and as people and communities up and down our country remember the people that we lost in World War I and World War II, we also ponder over the sentence of lest we forget. And what does that mean for us? For us, it's celebrating the lives of those people who came before us. We live upon the sacrifice, we live upon the legacies of those who came before us, the soldiers from the United Kingdom, from Europe, the soldiers from India, the soldiers from North Africa, the soldiers from the Caribbean and the States who took part in that war. We look back, we reflect upon that, and we show a sense of gratefulness. And Muslims remember by making prayers. Their prayers are a sense of gratitude to their loved ones that they lost. We make prayers that God forgives the shortcomings of those who came before us, and God elevates them in the life of the hereafter. And the second remembrance for Muslims would be in the form of reflecting, genuinely reflecting over what they established for us. We sit upon the backs of people who sacrificed their lives. We sit upon the backs of people who made sacrifices in knowledge, and that we sit here today vaccinated against illnesses and other forms of disease that we could have previously perished from. So as we move forward, perhaps we do not need to take arms, and many of us aren't part of the armed forces, but we can be brave in at least talking with those people that we may be fearful of, that we don't generally have a conversation with. And at the same time be courageous and open-minded enough to learn about people that are different to us. Because if we don't, then we may make the same mistakes of the past, and the sentence, lest we forget, may become useless. So I pray that we have the courage to take these brave steps, and I pray that we can remember our past to have a stronger and better future. May God be with us all.
So this remembrance, whether we are a person of faith or no faith, we come together to remember those who gave their lives in war that we may enjoy peace. We honour also those who currently serve in the armed forces. This Remembrance Sunday, in Sandwell, let us gather and honour and remember, and then appreciate a little more the peace that we have been given. And let us give thanks for that by the way in which we now act and live in that peace. Thank you.
Hope has never free. The shepherd will tend his sheep, the village will bloom again, and Timmy will go to sleep in his own little room again. There'll be bluebirds over and white cliffs of Dover. Tomorrow, just you wait and see. There'll be love and laughter and peace ever after. Tomorrow, when the world is free.
summer of 2019, the local British Legion contacted Sandwell Council. One of the local care homes had discovered the cremated remains of one George Mills on a shelf in a cupboard, which had not been collected following his funeral in 2011. One of the staff remembered George telling her he'd been a serving soldier in World War II, and the British Legion wanted, if this was indeed the case, to give George the funeral a World War II veteran deserved. They didn't know where to look for any records that might tell them. A few days searching in the archives soon demonstrated that George had indeed served in World War II, and in fact had played a pivotal role in one of the most important battles of the war. But to tell George's story and how he came to live in Wednesbury, we need to start in Wales. George William Ambrose Mills was born in Bridgend, Wales on March 7, 1923. By 17, he was a shop assistant living in Bath, and on turning 18, he joined the army. Originally, he was enlisted to the 24th Lancers, but in 1943, he was transferred to the Royal Engineers and was trained as an armoured vehicle driver, driving a converted Cromwell tank designed with one task in mind: to destroy the beached obstacles in Normandy at the start of the D-Day landings. AVRE Driver 79th Assault Squadron, 5th Assault Regiment, 1st Assault Brigade. At 0:26 hours on the 6th of June 1944, George and his crew landed on Sword Beach at the very eastern end of the invasion beaches, as part of the first wave of Allied troops landing that morning. Under heavy fire, George and his companions succeeded in their mission and moved inland. On August 8th, George was seriously wounded in action supporting Canadian troops during Operation Totalised and was evacuated to England. He suffered severe shrapnel wounds to his abdomen and spent weeks in a Dudley hospital, and in October was given a medical discharge. Whilst in hospital, he, like other casualties far from home and with family visits discouraged, received regular visits from local women tasked with keeping morale up. So much so that in June 1945, George married Tipton lass Gladys Mary Wood, and the couple settled in Wednesbury. Gladys died in 1982. By the early 2000s, George had moved to a nursing home and died in 2011. Although George was not born here, he, like all of us, made the Black Country his home, and I'd like to think he saw himself as at least an adopted Black countryman as much as a Welshman. He deserves to be remembered as much as anyone else who served as he did, and it is right that today he should be one of those we remember. On Monday the 1st of July 2019, George's ashes were scattered in Gornerwood Cemetery, where his wife's ashes had been scattered nearly 40 years earlier. He was attended by a guard of honour from the local Royal Engineer Regiment. I hope it is what he would have wanted. He was no more than he deserved.
One of the worst kept secrets of the last 2 years of the First World War was the secret weapon produced in Aldsbury. The Aldsbury Carriage and Wagon Works, located where the DPD depot is today, was one of the first sites to produce what became known as tanks, and by the end of the 1918 had produced nearly as many as the other tanks factories put together. The tank was developed in response to the atrocious conditions on the Western Front, which developed from the winter of 1914, as both the Allied armies and the German armies became bogged down in trenches, and warfare became a series of artillery duels, destroying roads, railway and buildings, and turning the battlefield and the areas behind the battlefield into a desolate, muddy wasteland, often impassable to anyone or anything except men on foot and tracked tractors. It was not long before the idea developed. It had been claimed for, and for many different people, including Winston Churchill, of mounting a gun on a tracked vehicle and using this to spearhead attacks across no man's land. The first vehicles were manufactured in absolute secrecy and called tanks, or water tanks, to try to give the impression that they were mobile water containers destined for the war in Mesopotamia, which is modern Iraq and Syria. The Ministry of War called them land ships. They were first used in action in 1916, but the British government tried to keep the location of their manufacture a secret, afraid of both bombing raids by Zeppelins and of sabotage from spies and the Fifth Columnists. But keeping the manufacture and assembly of these 30-ton monsters a secret, especially when patent shaft in Wednesbury was requisitioned to support their manufacture, and partially assembled vehicles could be seen, covered tarpaulins trundling through the streets to the testing grounds on the colliery spoil heaps established at Bromford Road in West Bromwich, just north of the carriage and wagon works. Over 1,400 of the last most successful World War I tanks and the Mk4 manufactured with over 1,000 leaving the Albury Works for the last great battles of 1918. Many local men asked for transfers to or were enlisted into the newly formed Royal Armoured Corps. No doubt many of them inspired by the technical marvel which a tank was in 1916, they saw driving through the streets of Albury. Many local men served in them and died in them. The tank didn't win the war. That was done by the men fighting and dying in the ships, planes, trenches, and of course in the tanks. No doubt while we remember the service of those who fought, we should also remember the service of those who stayed at home, working long, tiring shifts to ensure the soldiers were equipped with everything they needed, from warm socks to war-winning wonder weapons.
Oh
During both World Wars, the factories and workshops of Sandwell's 6 towns produced, under the strictest secrecy, all manner of weapons, ammunition and equipment, from bullets to bandages, tanks to tarpaulins, and gun barrels to gliders. Even Chance Brothers, makers of everything conceivable that can be made from glass, contributed, but to a project so secret that no one except a few men and some boffins at the War Office knew anything about. But one war artist sent to Smethwick to record the contribution being made in local factories almost gave the game away. Mervyn Peake was born in China in 1911, where his parents were Christian missionaries. He trained as an artist at the Royal Academy, and by the mid-1930s he was making a living as an artist, writer, theatre designer, and as a teacher at the Westminster School of Art. When war broke out in 1939, he applied for work as a war artist, but didn't get any commissions and was conscripted into the Royal Artillery in 1940. In 1942 he was discharged on medical grounds, and in January 1943 received a 35 guinea commission from the War Artist Advisory Committee to create a painting of glassblowers at the Chance factory in Smethwick. Where these highly skilled craftspersons, there is some discussion as to how many women were trained during the war to supplement pre-war male employees, were working in the only factory in Britain producing cathode ray tubes, an essential part of radar set screens. Radar was the secret weapon that had helped the RAF win the Battle of Britain by giving advanced warnings of the approach of German aircraft. Long before they could be seen or heard, of this commission Peake wrote, "Commissioned as a war artist to record my impressions of work in the glass-blowing factory near Birmingham, I found on entering the huge, ruinous, grimy, wharf-walled buildings a world upon its own, a place of roaring fires and monstrous shadows. This original commission was so well received that in the summer of 1943 he was granted a further 162 guinea commission to work at Chance's for a further 3 months. As well as producing 3 more large paintings, now in the collections of the Imperial War Museum and Manchester City Art Gallery, he produced a large number of sketches and drawings, and also a poem, which was not part of the commission, entitled Glassblowers, which went on to be the title piece in a poetry collection published in 1950. This poem, describing the Chance factory as a poetry of barbarous birth, this theatre of fitful light, and the workers, their cheeks are blown like gourds that sweat and flush, with goblin hues, rose and gold diaphanous, the violet glow and alizarin blush.
The horrors of the almost daily report of casualties on the Western Front and in other theatres of war were beginning to fade, as were the memories of the toll of life taken by the Spanish flu epidemic over the winter of 1918-1919. Although, as a visit to many of Sandwell's cemeteries can demonstrate, men continue to die of wounds, often caused by gas, received during active service well into 1922 and beyond, as most UK communities began to erect the war memorials that stand proudly in so many of our parks, town centres, and even our factories, schools and other places of work. It would be fair to think that many people thought we had turned a corner on the road back to normality, but fate had one further horrific reminder of the effects of war on ordinary people to deliver in Tipton. John Walter Knowles and his wife Louisa Kate owned a factory on Groveland Road in Tipton, next door to the Alhambra Cinema, which they had bought in 1916. In 1921, Knowles bought 160 tons of live ammunition left over after the war, with the intention of salvaging the lead bullets and copper cases of the live rounds, selling it on and making, he believed, a tidy profit in the process. Even in the 1920s, there were strict health and safety rules regarding the scrapping of live ammunition, which was quite an industry following the outbreak of peace in 1918. Knowles employed 30 local teenage girls to separate the various parts of the bullets into their component parts in an old pattern shop heated by an open fire inside the factory. No one received any special health and safety training, no PPE was provided, and a light dusting of found gunpowder covered many of the surfaces of the shop. A large pile of gunpowder built up over the course of the day and was swept out into the canal every evening. On the 6th of March 1922, shortly before 12 noon, the inevitable happened. A spark set fire to the gunpowder and a huge explosion blew the roof off the factory and sent a thick black oily cloud billowing through the streets of Tipton. Within hours, the 12 girls, the oldest 15 and the youngest 13, had died of horrific burns, and a further 7 were to die in hospital over the next weeks. 4 more suffered what we call today life-changing injuries. John Knowles was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 5 years penal servitude, and his wife was ordered to pay £10,000 in compensation to the families of the victims. Later in 1922, a memorial was built to the girls of Tipton and in Tipton Cemetery. Next year is the 100th anniversary of that explosion, and a commemorative ceremony is being planned. Join us if you can, but if you can't, try on that day to reflect on these last innocent victims of the horrors of the Great War.
We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do.
forgotten soldier in a forgotten war. We don't know much about the Reverend William Dimmock, who was killed in action in June 1915. We are not even sure when he was killed. only that it was sometime between June the 6th and June the 23rd. Other than that, he came from Rowley Regis. He had no next of kin, and we don't even know how old he was. Although best estimates would suggest, like so many other casualties of the First World War, he was in his early 20s. William Dimmock attended the Queen's Foundation Methodist Seminary in Birmingham between 1911 and 1913, and on completion and after his ordination was sent as a junior minister to Bradley Methodist Church in Colmslie. Rarely for a black country man, he travelled to London to enlist. We don't know why. Maybe his parents disapproved, maybe he was joining up with some friends who lived in London, maybe there was some other reason. Like so much about William, we don't know. We do know that he volunteered for the 25th Battalion Royal Fusiliers, nicknamed the Frontiersmen, which was an irregular battalion established officially in February 1915 by the eccentric Boer War veteran Daniel Patrick Driscoll, as a semi-independent auxiliary force intended to fight in the African colonies. William joined up as a private, not as a chaplain, although he may have served unofficially in that role, as most recruits were handpicked by Lieutenant Colonel Driscoll, who wanted experienced men who had already lived abroad, preferably in Africa. It seems unlikely that William had gained relevant experience at theological college. William did not provide the name of his next of kin. The battalion sailed for Africa in April 1915 with little formal military training having been given. It was only the British Army battalion of the war to see action without any formal army training. It arrived in Mombasa, in modern-day Kenya, on the 6th of May 1915 and immediately marched off into the jungle to attack the German colonial settlement of Bakuba, on the shores of Lake Victoria in modern-day Tanzania, where the Germans had established a colony in the late 19th century. This was a 600-kilometre march, followed by a 150-kilometre ferry ride across the lake. A 2-day-long battle began on June the 21st, with the Germans surrendering on the 22nd. We don't even know if William was killed in the fighting or had died on the journey. A number of men had malaria and other tropical illnesses and infections. He was buried at Bakuba on the 23rd of June, and after the war, his remains were transferred to the Commonwealth War Cemetery in Dar es Salaam. We know so little about William, who, if he had survived, would have had some stories to tell his grandchildren, I think. But we can still, at least, on this day, remember him.
West Bromwich. The early days and weeks of World War I's patriotic fever saw over 500,000 men volunteer to join the British Army. Local recruitment drives led to the formation of various PALS battalions, where men from the same town joined up together, trained together, and subsequently served and indeed died together. After the establishment of City Battalion of approximately 1,000 men in Birmingham in September 1914, the Mayor of West Bromwich, C.B. Batch, also the Chairman of the Baggies, announced the formation of West Bromwich Mayor's Battalion with a mass rally at the Hawthorns on the 24th of October after the home game against Bolton Wanderers. By this time, Britain had been at war for 2 months, and the first impetus of the recruitment drive launched at the outbreak of the war when it was dying down. Over 500,000 men had volunteered to serve in an army that was in peacetime only 100,000 strong. Few of the volunteers had been called up or started training, as the army infrastructure had not been designed to cope with such a massive increase, and the Ministry of War was struggling to create the training camps, procure uniforms and even equipment in order to do all the things that were to prove necessary to turn these enthusiastic volunteers into soldiers. About 50 men after the football match had volunteered, these alongside another 100 who had volunteered as part of the other local initiatives launched by Batch, including his eldest son Harold, an England and West Bromwich footballer, fell well short of the target of the 1,000 men needed to form a separate PALS battalion. The local infantry regiment, the South Staffordshire Regiment, offered to take the men away anyway, but would have been distributed amongst them its already existing battalions. But Councillor Batch wanted to keep his volunteers together and negotiated their transfer to the 10th Battalion of the Lincolnshire Regiment. An understrength PALS battalion known as the Grimsby Chums was established. D Company, about 120 men of the Chums, was made up primarily of black countrymen who had enlisted under one of Batch's schemes. On July 1st, 1916, at 9 am, D Company was ordered to attack the German stronghold of La Bossele. On the northern edge of what was the Somme battlefield, the attack had started at 7:30, but little progress had been made. By 9, German machine gunners were back in their trenches and controlled no man's land between the positions and the British lines. By 9:30, D Company had effectively ceased to exist. Over 60 men reported as dead or missing that evening, and over the next few days news started to reach the families of West Bromwich and other parts of the Black Country, whose sons, brothers and fathers had marched off so proudly in 1914. One man who didn't return was Horace Gittins, a journalist on the Express and Star. On July 19th, his commanding officer sent a letter to his family. I regret very much to have to write to you that Horace was killed on July 1st, when this battalion went over. Since that date he had been misassigned. We could not trace him until last night, when I found out from the salvage corps that he had been found and buried. All his belongings will be sent to you as soon as possible, but this will necessarily take a long time. He died bravely and fearlessly while advancing steadily and calmly, as if on parade, under the mist of intense machine gun fire. I cannot say how deeply I sympathise with you in your great sorrow and loss.
Is it the wind over my shoulder? Is it the wind that I hear gently whispering?
Are you alone there in the valley?
No, not alone, for you walk with me. Is it the wind there over my shoulder? Is it your voice calling quietly over the hilltop, down in the valley? Never alone, for you walk with me. When evening falls and the air gets colder, when shadows cover the road I am following,
Will I be alone there in the darkness?
no, not alone,
Not alone, and I'll never be.
never alone. You are walking, you're walking with me. Is it the wind there over my shoulder? Is it your voice calling quietly over the hilltop, down in the valley? Never alone, for you walk with me over the hilltop, down in the valley. Never alone, for you
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. We will remember them.
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 When the lights go on again, all over the world, and the boys are home again, all over the world, and rain or snow is all that may fall from the skies above. A kiss won't mean goodbye, but hello to love. When the lights go on again, all over the world, and the ships will sail again, all over the world, then we'll have time for things like wedding rings, and free hearts will sing. When the lights go on again, all over the world. When the lights go on again, all over the world, and the ships will sail again, all over the world, then we'll have time for things like wedding rings, and free hearts will sing. When the